You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks. This is episode 125. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who, if it was a video game that had been cancelled, he would be Star Wars 1312. Mark, how you doing?
I'm very well, dude. How are you? How's things?
I'm very good. It's been a busy week, but I say that every week, so I might as well just record it and clip it into the episode because I say the same thing every episode. But yeah, it's been a busy one. It's been a good one. Loads going on in Star Wars.
Yep.
All sorts of good stuff. How about you?
Yeah, pretty busy as well. Not as busy as you, because you were on the BBC. You were on the radio, weren't you, this week?
Yeah, I was on Colin Murray's show, which was on Wednesday night on Radio 5.
Yeah.
And I've never spoken to Colin before. And it was good fun. He does a thing where he pits one thing against another. So this week it was, which is the better, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Ooh.
And he did it that way around on purpose because, normally you would say Star Wars or Star Trek. And he went, Star Trek or Star Wars? And he had myself on to represent Star Wars. And he had a lady called Erin McDonald on from the States, who's an astrophysicist who actually works on the Star Trek shows. But he asked really clever questions that were like, you had to give an answer one way or the other. There's very few when you kind of didn't give an answer. Well, I've got a clip.
When did anybody want a phaser for Christmas? Like, nobody, right? You wanted a lightsaber. Nobody wanted to set the stun, right? You wanted a lightsaber, right? And you wanted to get your red one or your blue one or your green, whatever it was, the colours, what they had to be. So the lightsaber, in terms of the two key weapons, Mark, just hit the home run here.
The thing about Star Wars versus Star Trek in that sense is that, yes, unless it's a screen-used Captain Kirk phaser from the original series, yes, nobody particularly wants it. Star Wars fans are so desperate for lightsabers, they'll unspool the toilet paper from the toilet roll just to get the cardboard in the middle to pretend it's a lightsaber. Everybody wants a lightsaber, and you don't need to explain how a lightsaber works. That's another important distinction. Star Trek is science fiction, so Trek, with Technobabble and scientific advisors and such, will try and explain why these things work. You don't need to know why a lightsaber works. You push the button, on it comes, and away you go.
Did us proud, my friend. Honour was done that day. Great deeds and all that. I think that's more of a Klingon thing, isn't it? So is it still available? Can people still listen to it somewhere?
It is on the BBC iPlayer, and I think, as far as I understand, they put it on there for about 30 days. So if you go onto the iPlayer, I'll put the links in the article on Fantha, so if anybody wants to, they can go there. If they've got access to iPlayer, they can go there. It's on there for about a month.
And, I think we've talked about this before, but it's that misconception, isn't there, that it's us and them, and that actually, as you find out, both you and Erin are fans of both franchises, and I suppose it's just like anything, it's all good fun, all good entertainment, and that at the end of the day is the most important thing as far as I'm concerned.
You're not wrong. So we always talk about what stuff's coming out and what stuff we've got.
Yeah.
What stuff has come to your house this week, Mark?
Two things. One is quite a little small white box, which says Star Wars Rebel Fleet Troopers on the front, and it's one of those Star Wars Vintage Collection mail-away boxes that Hasbro put out not so long ago, and a whacking great big storage box for my Stormtrooper armour. So it was literally the tale of two different boxes. I think I may have overcompensated for how big my armour is, because this box is massive. So not sure if it's going to stay in the house. At the end of the day, it's got to get in the car along with Karen's costumes and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to have a look at that today and work out if it's going to fit or not. But how about yourself? Anything exciting?
A few bits and bobs. I had a copy of Midnight Horizon turn up because we will be speaking very soon, you and me, to Daniel Jose Older. Few other bits and bobs, nothing of any great consequence this week. I say that a lot. I seem to have loads of stuff knocking around, but nothing much has come this week. It's been another quiet week, which is probably a good thing for the floorboards because they're creaking.
So, okay, in that case, what about some news? What's going on?
Let us talk Star Wars news. One of the pieces we put on Fantha Tracks this week that got a lot of attention and a lot of looks and likes and all sorts of good stuff was a picture of Anthony Daniels standing in a corridor at Ealing Studios where they did shoot scenes from Attack of the Clones. in a light suit, not saying what he was doing there, what it was about, other than it's something to do with C-3PO. So clearly he's mocapping 3PO in some form or fashion. In the original article, I mentioned that logical head would say it's probably to do with the droid story, that forthcoming thing that ILM are working on, which we don't know much about. It sounds like a short, sort of animated, CG animated thing. Maybe it's that. But I did a bit of digging around, and I looked onto the Imaginarium's Instagram feed. Back in November, they posted a picture of a whole group of people all around an R2 unit. So they were doing something Star Wars related last year. So either Anthony's picture was from last year and he's just posted it, or it was recent and there's something ongoing or going on. Maybe it's a droid story. Maybe it's something else. We've got Galactic Star Cruiser opening fairly soon.
Yeah.
We've got to imagine there's going to be visuals associated with that. Just assuming it's a droid story might be correct. Could be for Obi-Wan. It could be for anything. But what do you think from looking at that picture?
Yeah, it's a good shout. My thought is, other than the fact that Anthony Daniels is basically lit up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
It's similar to you, to be honest, because I think there's some logic that, yes, it could be this droid tales, but you'd kind of think maybe that's more likely to have been kept under wraps, whereas you could possibly think if this was something for either the Disney parks or, as you said, the Galactic Star Cruiser, this might be something that had less emphasis on the secrecy, and so therefore he's been able to take a photo. But obviously, it could be anything. You know, it really could. My gut instinct is possibly that it's more likely to do with either the parks or the Galactic Star Cruiser, but I am always happy to be proven wrong if it means we get new Star Wars on our screens.
Oh, agreed with that. And we're proven wrong loads of times, and we're not proud. Oh, we're not proud. We don't mind being wrong. But if it was a TV project, if it was Kenobi or Andor or something like that, it would have been done at the volume. There's a volume here in the UK at Pinewood, so they would have done it there, not at the Imaginarium. And also, for Anthony to put an image out like that, for the Imaginarium to have put an image out earlier, or late last year rather, if that was to do with the Star Wars TV series, I'm just thinking from security and just generally, they're very cautious about what images they put out.
Yeah.
I can't see that being the case. So Galactic Star Cruiser, to me, and clearly to you as well, seems to make more sense that it's just a little bit, it's not so secretive in that sense, and it's giving literally nothing away, is it?
No, exactly. I mean, to be honest, it could be a TV commercial for a licensee, and
like the Curry's advert or something.
Exactly, totally, yeah. And that was filmed all live action, wasn't it? Actually, at the Thurrock Curry's store, if memory serves correctly. It's a good point, as you said. You could get Anthony to a volume. Surely it would make some of the animation and the CG effects easier if you've got C-3PO in the referenced environment, i.e., getting the reflections off of his suit, which is basically one reason for the volume. That's why it works so well with the Mandalorian and his Beskar armor. It means you don't have to have quite so much tidy up and worrying about having to map fake reflections and stuff onto the costume. Sure. Yeah, but hopefully we'll find out sooner rather than later.
Hi, this is Neil Scanman. You're listening to Panther Tracks.
The Book of Boba Fett has seen a character jump from the pages of the comics onto the big screen, if you've got a big telly, that is. Carey Jones in the role of Black Krrsantan. It's come out of the pages of Darth Vader and Dr. Aphra, and he's absolutely blown the fandom away. Brilliant performance. And if you look into the history of Carey Jones, he's actually got a fascinating career in prosthetics. So he's worked on all sorts of films and projects. He was one of the Predators in the 2010 film. Done all sorts of stuff. He's 6'7", he's a big lad, and he's perfect to play a Wookiee. So all of that is fantastic. That has not been missed by the family of the late Peter Mayhew, who sent a lovely message via Instagram to Carey. I shall read it out. Warmest Wookiee welcome to Carey Jones, who is playing fierce Black Krrsantan in the Book of Boba Fett. You have some giant shoes to fill. Welcome to the Wookiee family. Peter would have loved seeing a Wookiee truly unleashed. So that's come from Angie Mayhew and the Mayhew family and the Peter Mayhew Foundation and such. That is rather cool, isn't it? Given that people like Peter and Jeremy and Kenny and Carey, obviously, these actors have left us in the last sort of 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose it's just nice to have that recognition and that nod that Angie and the family are still keeping tabs on Star Wars and what's going on with Wookiees and stuff. So that's really nice. I think it's a nice feeling that as we move on into the future with all these Star Wars shows and stuff, that there's still that sense of like a touchstone to the actors who have portrayed characters in the past. And I think it's quite nice that if there's that family kind of feeling about Star Wars that hopefully never goes away.
Obviously, we've got Obi-Wan Kenobi coming up with Hayden Christensen coming back as Darth Vader. You think if Dave was still around, Dave Prowse, okay, he didn't do so much with Lucasfilm in his later years, but certainly out in the fandom, it would have been another elevation for him in terms of what he does. I know Details, for example, who played Keith Olsite in Solo, has been doing a lot of stuff lately because the Pikes have turned up in Book of Boba Fett. So for certain actors in certain roles, it brings them back to the forefront. And like I say, all the guys we've just mentioned, for the exact reasons you just said really nicely, it would have been really cool for everybody to churn over and get interested in all that stuff again.
You wonder if Carey's gone and sat down and studied all of Peter's performances as Chewbacca and that, and maybe kind of gone, right, so this is what Chewbacca does, but obviously Black Krrsantan is his own character, but I need to kind of draw off of the Chewbacca character because obviously that's the one reference point that everybody has. And so you kind of think it's good how authentic his performance is, and I loved just him just ripping Matt Trandashan's arm off the other week. That was one of those things that, although we saw it in the deleted scenes of The Force Awakens with Unkar Plutt, it was so good to actually see it, and obviously a Trandashan, given the feud between the Wookiees and the Trandashans.
It was, like you say, all these little touches that sort of refer to old stuff, and that's something we've heard about. Oh, it's a line in the original, isn't it? It's good to see. And you make a great point about studying Peter as the original Wookiee, but Carey as Krrsantan is his own character, and I guess he probably read, I would imagine, I don't know, some of the comics to get a vibe for Krrsantan from the comics, and there's a little bit of stuff out there, not enough.
No,
we need a figure now.
Need a figure, and I think it would be great if we could get a short run comic series or something about Krrsantan. I think that would be quite fun as well. He is one of those characters that pops up now and again, and you just think there's definitely more to him than what we've seen. But I don't necessarily need to see his backstory. I think it'd just be great to see him almost in the present day and just kind of like doing his stuff and what have you. Hopefully, we're going to see more of him in the Book of Boba Fett as the last couple of episodes going to roll out in the coming weeks.
Which we will be talking about on Making Tracks Reaction Chat every Wednesday. As soon as the episode comes out, you and me get together, talk about it, edit, stick it up on the site, get it out there. So keep listening. We've got 2 more episodes of this season. And then hopefully, come May time maybe, we'll be talking Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Come what may.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
Great news. We've got a listener's question.
Whoop, whoop.
It's from Ro Gazga from the Scariff podcast. It came via Twitter. And this is his question. Do you guys think the volume technology helps or hinders the look of the Star Wars streaming shows? Sometimes I can tell when shots seem short and truncated. We seem to be missing those grand scope wide shots that we're used to in the films. So, fair point.
Yeah.
And people have said it. Some people have spotted, they can see where the seams are and such. We've talked about this many times on the show. It is a new emerging technology. We're only really, think about it, into the 3rd season of there being stagecraft as an option. Obviously, the first 2 seasons of Mando and now Book of Boba Fett. It's here for the long haul until something even better comes along, which I would think is quite a way off, but you never know. So what do you think? Do you think it helps or hinders? Because he makes a point, Star Wars does that big scope, grand vista thing. Stagecraft can't do that because it's a physical limitation thing, whereas obviously ILM can make it the size of the universe if they want it to be.
Yes and no. And the reason why I say that is because I know that it's fairly easy to then add set extensions into the volume. If you imagine you've got this sphere, and obviously the field of view that the camera presents moves around, but basically it's very easy to knock out a panel, or let's say knock out a window on a volume background and put a bit of green in, and then that gets sent off to ILM or to a VFX house, and then they add extra stuff in. And I think that's something they did. They did some set extensions on season 2 of The Mandalorian, if I recall, because again, they realised very early on that you are limited by the size of the volumes, and subsequent volumes are bigger. So it will be interesting to see, because I think for Love and Thunder, they've used one of the bigger volumes to film on. So it'd be interesting to see how that looks. Because in some respects, you've got to think of the volume as just basically being an updated version of back projection mixed in with green screen. And ultimately, again, with green screen, you're going to be limited to the size of the environment that you're in. How big an area of green can you put out and stuff like that? And how much of an area do you need to see? But you do have to be aware as you move around inside the view of the camera, actually what's happening outside it. Because it is a weird thing to actually see the camera move. So the camera sees something almost completely different to actually what the environment is, because it's changing perspective and inside. So it's a weird thing. But I think he is right. I noticed stuff in season 2 of Mandalorian whereby you could kind of go, yeah, that's definitely volume, and that's where the edge of the volume is, so to speak. But I think that will just come with a little bit of imagination, and that will come with other productions wanting to push the boundaries. And that ultimately, who better than ILM and Lucasfilm to start pushing the boundaries and really see what the limitations of this new technology is going to be?
You've got a bit of experience because if I remember with your work at Sky, didn't you go onto a volume style set to see some of this stuff?
Yes, yeah, exactly. The volume that we went on to wasn't as big as the new volumes. These were ultimately test shoots, so the budget wasn't necessarily there. Again, what you do is you build in the notion that actually, okay, so this section needs to be a set extension, that needs to be a set extension, which go back to the prequels and that. And you look at the Palpatine's offices and stuff, you had a little bit of physical set and then just a sea of blue. And you can kind of do that with a volume in some respects. So basically what's going to happen is we're going to see where these limitations are. And I think there's going to be an understanding pretty soon in the next couple of years where you would draw the line and go, right, so that's definitely something that we can shoot in the volume. This is something where we necessarily can't. We also got to remember it's a combination of time and money. Every creative wants to have these massive sweeping vistas. It's whether or not there's time and money in the budget to warrant that. And you kind of sometimes think, well, actually, yeah, we can do a huge Mos Espa scene, but it's going to cost you $25,000 to do that. Or you could have more explosions or something like that. And so that is a difficult balancing act that you have to start to weigh up when you start to cost up a production. It's like, where can we cost save and be more efficient with a budget, and what things really need to be in to really sell the scope of a story?
Definitely. I mean, I think this week's episode of Book of Boba Fett, or Mandalorian 2.5, really, seemed to strike a balance between what was clearly ILM doing, the stuff on the space station, the vistas there when he's in the N1 flying over Mos Eisley, the Beggars Canyon stuff. Obviously, that's ILM. So unless there's scenes when he's close up on him in the cockpit, when you'd imagine maybe that is done on a volume for reflections.
I would probably say that could be. I would be surprised if they didn't do it. They've got that life-size Naboo cockpit already set up. Plonk him in there, and then it's just like, right, okay, we're going to film a load of stuff.
Now they've got this new technology, and it's the shiny new toy at Christmas sort of thing. Do you think at the moment, and this might be speaking to what you just said a minute ago about give it a couple of years, do you think the scenes that they're shooting now as stagecraft scenes, that in a couple of years they might actually sit back and go, that's better as green screen? And do you think they're using it just because it's the new thing? Or is it more like you said, that they'll realise that, well, this is actually better, because green screen is just flawless anyway. They've got it down to a T, and they have for a while. So they'll go, that is actually, we should do that as a green screen scene. The actors, like Ewan, for example, has just reacted so well to, it's so great. You can see what's going on. You feel like you're there to a degree. I mean, like you say, they don't see what we see. The camera only sees what we see on the set. Everybody else has got this weird warped wall of whatever, but at least they're in a place. And it's not just seas of green that would just drive a colourblind person crazy. But do you think they'll find a moment where, I mean, maybe they do now, and we just don't know the full ins and outs. And when we see the Disney Gallery Book of Boba Fett, we'll realise that not everything we saw was stagecraft. But do you think that's one of the balances they've got to find?
Yeah, I think so. And also, I suppose at the end of the day, it's about assets. So if you're doing a series like the Book of Boba Fett, which so far, with the exception of this week's episode, has been very similar environments being repeated time and time again. Once you decide you're going to do them in the volume, then it's like, well, we've got those assets now. We can revisit that. So let's go back to the volume. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, for instance, the speeder chase from last week's episode. How much of that was there and how much was digital set extensions? Because the thing is, you don't even need green screen to have set extensions. And I'll reference an article that actually I wrote for Fan for Tracks the other day, which is about James Bond, of all things. And there's scenes in No Time to Die at the start where they're in Matera in Italy, which is a beautiful location. But basically, if you go to Matera and you look at this vista, you'll see the town almost as it is, but you won't see the bridge, which they basically nicked from outside of the field of view that the camera did and moved it in because it kind of helped to frame the whole shot. And there wasn't any green screen there. And that's the kind of thing that you can do to create digital set extensions, is that actually you don't necessarily need loads of green screens and stuff like that. You just need markers that you can actually tell the VFX companies, this is what you need to track in order to keep and maintain the perspective and the size and scale of this extension that we need. I think sometimes people forget that actually there's so much going on, so much tinkering going on, that actually it's classed as VFX because it has to go through a CGI pipeline, but isn't necessarily something that is there to add a spaceship or a lightsaber blade onto screen. It's actually about the small, subtle touches that just create a bigger, more vaster world. So it'll be interesting to see how much they kind of show if they do a Book of Boba Fett gallery episode, for example.
Yeah, that feels like it's going to be the real eye-opener. Yeah. I wonder if they'll do it like this time. I mean, we haven't seen the last two episodes. One of the things that I put in the group review for chapter 5 was we've still got, I mean, this episode was 51 minutes long. So potentially the next 2 episodes could be 51 minutes long, which means you've got a 90-minute movie still to go.
Yeah.
So we've teed everything up. Now it feels like the last 2 hours, well, it's basically like a Star Wars live action movie chopped in 2, isn't it? So we could get some really crazy stuff. But you've got to wonder that the end of season 2 Mando, people are going to start talking about if chapter 7 doesn't have a mega moment like that, people are going to be disappointed. They shouldn't be, because that's not what it's all about. So you could have something crazy. You could have, I don't know, Hamill could come back again. Harrison Ford could do the thing that people keep saying apparently he's done, which I don't believe. And all these other little things that are apparently happening. Any one of them could be so groundbreaking, so incredible, so OMG.
Yeah.
That they'll put that Disney gallery out like they did the first time for season 2, and then put it out again with the Hamill stuff. You know, so they did it like in 2 parts. Whereas obviously season 1 we got a whole 6-part, whatever it was, 6 or 8-part series, which was fantastic. And I miss that. And I wish they could do that again. Yeah, maybe we'll learn more then. But just to go back to the question from Rogazga, great question. Technology is only going to get better. But like you say, I think it's just how the wizards at ILM and the stagecraft team and the directorial choices as well, because that's got to come into it. You know, whichever one works best. They're building up that palette now, aren't they, of techniques and technology.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark panthertracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
The 31st of January, 1997. Where were you? What were you doing? Because on that day, at least in America, the Star Wars Special Editions debuted in the cinema for the very first time.
Star Wars. For an entire generation, you've only been able to see it on a TV screen. Now, Star Wars is back on the big screen.
There'll be no one to stop us this time.
With newly enhanced visual effects, digital sound, and a few new surprises. Star Wars, the Special Edition, starts January 31st at theaters everywhere. Rated PG.
And I think it's fair to say, without the special editions, we would be in a slightly different world than we exist in now. It's quite worthy that we spend a little bit of time and celebrate the fact that 25 years since the special editions was first released.
Oh, I cannot believe it's 25 years. I was 25. I mean, that's half my life ago. That is scary.
That is scary. I was still at school. I was in year 9 or maybe year 10. Star Wars Special Edition was first released in the US, and we got it, I believe, was it the 31st of March?
It was a few weeks later, because I do remember watching the box office numbers on Box Office Mojo. I used to print them off every week.
Oh, really?
A Toy Story folder, which I really wish I'd kept those sheets. I got rid of them years ago, and I regret it terribly. It was fascinating to watch the numbers, because I think initially they were just going to make a New Hope Special Edition. That was the initial idea, and then I think it just kind of expanded off the back of that, because they did it, and we'll talk about this, to the technology of the time. It was so incredibly well done that when New Hope Special Edition came out, it broke the box office January opening weekend record and held it till, I think, Cloverfield, like 11 years later.
Wow, yeah.
So for a film to be re-released sort of 20 years after it first came out and to do those kind of numbers was just amazing.
For me, I don't even recall when I first heard about it, but there was a lot of press coverage, wasn't there, around it? And I think it may have been maybe StarWars.com. There was the Anatomy of a Dewback and something else. I don't know if they were first shown. I think they were first shown on there, weren't they?
I mean, I read about it. It was mentioned in SFX and Dreamwatch and Starburst and all those magazines that we used to read. And I think StarWars.com was set up for the special editions, because they knew that they were going to go on to the prequels after that. I think also it was the first Pepsi deal that they did. And I know a lot of the Pepsi money went into the budget of the prequels, so it all sort of helped that massive $2 billion deal or whatever crazy money it was back then. But the first time I remember reading and seeing it, I went to the Royal Premiere of Star Trek First Contact.
Yeah.
And I was sat there and I bought the programme and I was flicking through the programme. And they always have in the programmes, or at least they did at the premieres, all the effects companies and promotional people saying congratulations to Paramount on your new film and yada yada yada. And just at the back, it didn't say congratulations or anything. This is to my recollection. All it had was a 20th Century Fox logo and coming 1997, and I forget what the other films were because they really don't matter. It just said Star Wars Trilogy Special Edition. That's all it said. And I'm sat at the Star Trek premiere, hyped up for watching what is still my favourite Star Trek film, being like ridiculously excited because I've just seen something Star Wars in the Star Trek. What's going on? Question to you. Seeing Star Wars on the big screen is always amazing, especially the original, because it's such a treat. But when you saw it for the first time and you realise that okay, we'd not long since had the THX version, we'd had the widescreen versions, we'd had the remastered versions and all that stuff. And the last time you're going to get the original version on VHS and all that stuff, because it was still VHS. And then all of a sudden, this film comes out and there's extra stuff. What did you make of that?
So it was the first chance I'd ever seen Star Wars on a big screen. So that was exciting. And also back then, I remember, really up until then, I was the only, shall we say, quote unquote, Star Wars fan in my year. Got picked on a little bit for all that kind of stuff and being a nerd, mainly by my twin brother. That's understandable. But then suddenly, because of that and, you know, Tazos and stuff like that, I kind of became a property of interest by some people who would come and start talking to me and about Star Wars and all this stuff. And suddenly, you know, all these stories come out and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I still got this and blah, blah, blah. And so suddenly, I mean, it lit up a generation who was only really peripherally aware, I think, of Star Wars, either through older brothers or, you know, through computer games, to actually, to be reminded of the fact that it is one of the greatest stories ever shown on the big screen. So it was fantastic. And I still got, obviously, all my, I think it was KFC did all the toy premiums over in the UK, wasn't it? And so I've still got all of those floating around somewhere. So it's a very special, unique, and for me anyway, very nostalgic time. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying now when we look back at some of the effects which have since been tweaked and stuff, and Blu-rays and stuff, that you can kind of see they were really pushing the envelope with what they were trying to do. But, you know, in my mind, what scope and vision. And I think also now, I think sometimes we forget, because there's been additional updates, what was in the original special edition, then what became, you know, from a subsequent Blu-ray release or something like that. Definitely something that will always stick in my mind as a watershed moment, at least for my fandom.
Yeah, I mean, the 90s was such a good decade for Star Wars anyway, because everyone talks about the dark times, which wasn't actually as dark as it's made out to be, or as long.
Yeah.
You know, Heir to the Empire and Dark Empire start, and then your grassroots Star Wars fans are really starting to bubble up again. And in 96, we'd had Shadows of the Empire, which a not confident franchise wouldn't attempt something like Shadows of the Empire if they didn't think it was going to work. And it did work very well. The books publishing programs were going great. Dark Horse was spunking comics out like nobody's business. You know, there was all sorts of stuff going on. StarWars.com had launched in 96 as well,
November.
so that was a big deal. And all these things that are all building towards Phantom Menace.
Hello, I'm Dennis Lawson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
My memory of it, one was at the time, you know, you've seen Forrest Gump and The Mask, and ILM are just absolutely smashing it. There's all these amazing films coming out with incredible visual effects, and Twister came out in 96. First Contact, which I just mentioned, and then you get the special editions, which felt like another massive step up, because you're seeing stuff that, how are they doing this? How are they doing this? But I think when we saw this, it was just so exciting and so interesting. And of course, you've got all the peripheral stuff. So Decipher are doing the games, the card
CCG,
games. Hasbro were releasing figures that were sort of fitting in with the special edition, like the ASP droid, and there was other stuff that came out. So there was a lot of stuff around it, but generally it just felt like an old friend had come back, especially with A New Hope, because I think Jedi still felt kind of fresh in 97, even though that sounds ridiculous now. It was only 14 years old in 97. It wasn't an old film. It wasn't as old as Revenge of the Sith is now. So it felt like an old friend had come back, and there was a really good, warm feeling around the special editions. That changed somewhat after Phantom Menace came out, which everybody knows about, and that's all based on, you know, your own point of view. But nevertheless, it felt like from 97 to 99, including the trailer one for Phantom Menace, it was just a fantastic period of time to be a Star Wars fan.
Obviously, because you were a little bit older, I didn't really get any sense of criticism about the special editions or the changes. Was that something that was more kind of bubbling up with the grassroots older fans?
The critique on the effects is more of a thing that's grown over the years.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of unfair to judge 2022's opinion and transposing that on 1997. So that's not fair, because of course it's better now than it was in visually. It's just technology moves on. So that's not the point. But I think when it came out, there were a couple of criticisms. I mean, you were never going to put the Declan Mulholland scenes back in because, you know, that wouldn't work. And we know Jabba was physically bigger than that. And the Jabba original special edition Jabba, especially the eyes, looked nothing like Jabba in Return of the Jedi. So that just didn't work. It was a valiant effort. But then you take it along to the tidied up land speeder shots, which I remember the Insider were really deeply into describing and going into. And that was a great area to be an Insider reader. The X-Wing stuff in the battle at the end, the Han Solo running around the corner and seeing the TIE fighter bay with all the stormtroopers. Yeah, there's certain shots that were like really brilliantly well done. But then other shots, like putting all those Rontos, which were just Jurassic Park brontosauruses with adjusted heads, putting those into Mos Eisley and covering up stuff that you used to watch in the background, all the interesting stuff in the background, which after you've watched the film 50 times, you tend to watch the backgrounds, don't you? Because you want to see other stuff. That was a frustration. I think it's fair to say even then that was a frustration that people weren't mad keen on. But generally, it was really well received. And of course, the sound was punched up. They did a great job on the print. They remastered the print so the print looked cleaner and lots of things that they did that just made it feel like not a film that came out 20 years ago. And now, 45 years ago, good grief.
It does make me want to dust off my old VHS player and put on the special edition. If I'm going to go really nostalgic, possibly the gold special edition, the Pan-O-Scan version. Yeah.
Pan-O-Scan.
Yeah. So, because those special edition trilogies, they didn't come out that long after, did they? I think, was it like that summer, literally like July or August, they were released on VHS? I mean, we didn't have to wait long to get them, like from the cinema to the home, which was quite fantastic because I think I got both of those for my birthday, if memory serves correctly.
They were great. It was great to have them, and I think the Star Wars, was probably, it was the one they probably put the most money into. I would say was Star Wars. Empire didn't have as much. Jedi didn't have as much, but skipping around a little bit, the Wampa sequence in Empire was excellent because the suit was so much better, and so special edition Wampa looks great. I think they did a brilliant job with that. So that worked really well. One thing I never liked and still rankles is the music tracking change. So they added bits in at the end of Empire with Darth Vader's Star Destroyer, putting the shuttle Tidarium in. Instead of Bring My Shuttle, that pissed off Bring My Shuttle, it was Prepare My Star Destroyer for My Arrival. I hate that and always will. And it changed the music edit, so the music didn't land in quite the same places during the lightsaber fight. So there was little adjustments they made almost for the sake of making them that didn't need to be done. And even to the point of when you see the shuttle land on the Star Destroyer and there's Moff Gerrod, he shouldn't be there. We know that's a cutscene from Jedi. So there's little things like that they didn't need to do. But for the most part, it worked really well.
I mean, for me, I pretty much do agree with, like you said, most of those changes in Empire and Jedi, and especially for the music changes at the end, that really does kind of rankle me a little bit. And also, I do agree with you about the Star Destroyer. It starts to be where you start to possibly see where Lucas is maybe asking to make changes that he wants, but the films don't necessarily need. And one for me that isn't necessarily as strong as the original is the Wampa scene in The Empire Strikes Back. For me, in the original, I always felt like it was that Jaws kind of tension that you get by not seeing the creature and stuff like that. So you kind of get, it's a different tension that you have. Obviously, when you see it, the hope is that you see the beast and then you see the fact, it's quite a big, scary, meat-eating thing, so Luke's in trouble. But for me, I quite liked the notion of not seeing it. It kind of had a slightly more authentic vibe.
That very much goes back to, you say Jaws. One of the reasons you didn't see the shark in Jaws was because that bloody rope, that mechanical jaw didn't work, did it? And it was the same with Alien. Ridley Scott realised that the suit was crap, and so you didn't see it. But now, this is like 96, 97, of course. In terms of what Lucas could do, he could now visualise things that he wanted to then. And here's a question for you, and it continues into the prequels. Do you think sometimes, just because he can, doesn't mean he should? I.e., exactly what you say about the Wampa scene, that tension of not seeing it, is sometimes every bit as effective. Sometimes it's what you don't say as opposed to what you do say, isn't it?
No, it is, exactly. And I mean, we've seen this in every single subsequent release of the original trilogy up until, the sagas were released on 4K. There's been a change or like a little tweak, and you just kind of go, at what point has, the creative control George still had back then was a little bit too much, and actually by this point the film's out. And so there's one thing to release a quote-unquote director's cut, which is like the director's vision, which is obviously what we kind of sometimes get with like Ridley Scott and stuff like that. But when it then becomes the only version available and considered the canon version, that's when it becomes an issue, when you start changing stuff like that. I mean, and to be honest, it's not even like adding Hayden Christensen into the end of Return of Jedi. That is not my issue by any stretch of imagination. It's with silly stuff like the McClunky edit, which, as far as I'm concerned, adds absolutely nothing to that scene, other than the fact it now feels even more awkward. Adding the rock in front of R2 when he's hiding in the crevice in the Dune Sea. For me, I really like Jedi rocks, and I quite like the vibe. It's not quite lapty neck, but it doesn't offend me, like that Return of the Jedi extended musical scene. And I quite like seeing that extra stuff with Ula and stuff like that. So it's not too bad. And generally for The Empire Strikes Back, I think that is the one which is, I think, integrated the best with all those additional kind of set extensions and that you see in Cloud City. For me anyway, it does open up that whole environment and makes it feel a lot more authentic. It swings and roundabouts, but it would be great to have the option to go back to an original version of Star Wars and the original trilogy. So you've got that as a true kind of reference, and, you know, and people can make the decision, even if the most up-to-date version with all the changes and edits and stuff is the one that's considered canon, but at least you've got an official release that is, you know, celebrating the theatrical release when it was first done, because I think that is important as well. It's something that hopefully maybe we'll get at some point. Who knows, you know, we can hope. Right, well, I think I'm going to go and, like I said already, dust off my VHS player and my gold copy of the Star Special Edition, and hope to high heaven that my VHS player doesn't actually chew those VHS tapes up, because that would just be heartbreaking. But for now, anyway, that is all we have time for. And thank you very much to Rogue Gasker for sending in that question. I think that was quite an interesting one, and hopefully something that we will come back to and mull over again in later seasons of Mando or Andor or Kenobi. But of course, if you'd like to send a question, and it is always welcome and most appreciated, you're probably going to need to know how to do that. So Mark, can you let the good listeners know how they can send in a question?
I certainly can. And I hate to tell you, but Anthony Daniels signed your gold VHS box set, but he signed it in gold pen, so good luck finding that one. If you want to be part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com or check out the free Panther Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@panthertracks.com. Yeah, like Mark said, get those questions in. We'll talk about anything and everything. Comment, like, and share on any of our social media feeds at Panther Tracks. So be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Panther Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniels and Benetta Marshall for our voiceovers. Adam is back with a new episode of Panther from Down Under, first one in a year. It's now on your feed, so have a listen. It's a short episode, he's just getting back into the swing of it. He'll be talking every month about all the latest Star Wars stuff and topics from future, past and present, all sorts of good stuff. Remember, tune into our Panther Tracks news show, Good Morning Tatooine, live Sunday evenings, most Sunday evenings, 9 o'clock UK time, 4 PM Eastern, 1 PM Pacific, on Facebook and YouTube. And that's me done for another episode, well, until Wednesday.
Until Wednesday, yeah, and it's going to be our penultimate episode of the Book of Boba Fett, so I can't wait to get stuck into that, and we can chat over all the speculation and our thoughts and theories and reactions to what we've just witnessed on screen. So looking forward to that, mate. So until then, stay safe and look after yourself. And for everybody else, thank you very much for listening. It's always appreciated. You can follow me at mmulcaster on Instagram, and also you can follow the other Mark at prefect_timing on Twitter and Instagram. And until next time, stay safe, get boosted, get vaccinated if you haven't already, and of course make sure you eat all your greens, take all your vitamins, and may the force be with you.
Coming up next on Panther Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.
Leaving that in.
Yeah.
Whoosh.